Many different types of barcode scanning machines exist, but they all work on the same fundamental principles. They all use the intensity of light reflected from a series of black and white stripes to tell a computer what code it is seeing. White stripes reflect light very well, while black stripes reflect hardly any light at all. The barcode scanner shines light sequentially across a barcode, simultaneously detecting and recording the pattern of reflected and non-reflected light. The scanner then translates this pattern into an electrical signal that the computer can understand. All scanners must include computer software to interpret the barcode once been entered. This simple principle has transformed the way we are able to manipulate data and the way in which many businesses handle recordkeeping.
Well, in 2004 we integrated ticketing in southeast Queensland, so we have introduced a paper ticket that allowed you to travel across all the three modes in southeast Queensland, so bus, train and ferry, and the second stage of integrated ticketing is the introduction of a smart card, and the smart card will enable people to store value, so to put value on the card, and then to use the card for traveling around the system. Those of you who've never heard the term Neo-Latin may be forgiven for thinking it's a new South American dance craze. If you're puzzled when I tell you it has something to do with the language of Romans, take heart. Over the years many classes who have confessed they are not really sure what it is either. Some have assumed that they are so-called Late Latin, written at the end of the Roman Empire. Others have supposed it must have something to do with the Middle Ages. Or perhaps it's that pseudo-Latin which my 5- and 7-year-old boys seem to have gleaned from the Harry Potter books, useful for spells and curses that they zip one another with makeshift paper ash ones. No, in fact, Neo-Latin is more or less the same as the Latin that was written in the ancient world, Classical Latin. So, what's so new about it?
For the first time, Japanese researchers have conducted a real-life experiment that shows how some traffic jams appear for no apparent reason. They placed the 22 vehicles on a single track and asked the drivers to cruise around at a constant speed of 30 km an hour. At first, traffic moves smoothly, but soon, the distance between cars started to vary, and vehicles clumped together at one point on the track, but the jams spread backward around the track, like a shockwave at a rate of about 20 km an hour. Real-life jams move backward at about the same speed. Now that story's been scotched, as only part of contingency planning. But it was a symptom of the dramatic turn of events in South Australia, and it flushed out other remarks from water academics and people like Tim Flannery, indicating that things were really much worse than had been foreshadowed, even earlier this year. So is Adelaide, let alone some whole regions of South Australia, in serious bother. Considering that the vast amount of its drinking water comes from the beleaguered Murray, something many of us outside the state may not have quite realized. Is their predicament something we have to face up to as a nation?
To test that idea, he and his team used lasers to cut tiny grooves into aluminum surfaces. Those grooves, once filled with water and frozen, turned into tiny stripes of ice, which indeed kept the rest of the surface 80 to 90% frost-free, even in incredibly humid cold air.
What's happening is the ice-striped areas are just so attractive to the moisture that it kind of tractor beams all the moisture that is going toward the surface. It kind of tractor beams it toward the stripe regions preferentially, such that the intermediate areas, if you design it right, just stay completely dry.
You can find the results and some cool time-lapse videos in the journal ACS Applied Materials and Interfaces. Barrico and his team have already patented the tech. If it proves viable after more R&D, it might make our wintertime fight against frost a lot more environmentally friendly.
It seemed to us that the 17-to-1 sex ratio was just too extreme to be real.
So Feldman and his team used computational models to investigate other ideas, and they found that bloody fights between genetically homogeneous clans could have produced the same results.
Essentially, we're saying the clans that are fighting one another are built around having the same Y chromosome.
Imagine a single deadly battle, knocking out a whole clan of men with the same Y chromosomes. Then repeat that unpleasant scenario a few times. You'd get a huge drop in the diversity of Y chromosomes, as the victorious clans won battles and expanded. The details are in the journal Nature Communications. Eventually, Y chromosome diversity bounced back, as smaller clan structures were replaced by large genetically diverse cities and societies. A cultural innovation that we too inherited.
Absolutely spectacular mission. And it's not a rover, it's a lander. It's designed to land and deploy several instruments.
Jim Green, NASA's new chief scientist, talking about the InSight mission to Mars. InSight launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California the morning of May 5th. He spoke with Scientific American space editor Lee Billings, who recorded their conversation.
One instrument will be set on the surface, and it will, measure Mars quakes. Now, why are Mars quakes important? Well, Mars quakes because we can get the acoustic signals and see how they are displayed in time.
That's a female northern cardinal. And here's a female Venezuelan troupial. Many people assume that male songbirds are the ones doing the crooning. But more than 660 species of songbirds are known in which the females sing as well. And there are still 3,500 species of songbird in which the female singing status is unknown, which implies that there could be plenty more female singers to be found.
We often talk to people, both people who are scientists and ornithologists, but also people who are birders and citizen scientists who say, yeah, I have this story where a female was clearly
It's called the whale shark, and, as the name implies, it's huge. In fact, it's the largest living fish in the world. But there's still much unknown about this big animal.
They're very elusive. They're difficult to catch up with.
Al Dove, an expert on the biology of whale sharks and vice president of research and conservation at Georgia Aquarium. But citizen scientists are helping Dove and other whale shark experts get a fuller picture of this marine creature. Tourists, residents, and professional scientists have documented the fish for an online database called the Wild Book for Whale Sharks by taking advantage of each shark's unique pattern of skin spots. Every spring, a bird called the barnacle goose migrates from the North Sea coast to the Russian Arctic, where it breeds. That's a 3,000-kilometer trip. Along the way, the geese usually take pit stops to rest and refuel. But the Arctic spring has been arriving earlier and earlier. So researchers analyzed 6 years of barnacle goose migratory tracking data to try to figure out if these geese, and other species like it, can adapt their migration to stay in sync with the changing seasons.
And then we used satellite images to see when snow was melting in the Arctic, and then we could relate the timing of the birds to the snow melt.
Bart Nolet, an ecologist at the University of Amsterdam. Nolet and his colleagues found that the geese did not leave their wintering grounds sooner to match the earlier Arctic spring, but they did speed up their trip by skipping many of their usual stopovers.
The more we learn about Neanderthals, the more like us they become. They made jewelry from shells and eagle talons. They probably painted cave art. They may have buried their dead as well. And now some archaeologists say evidence is mounting for yet another skill the Neanderthals might have shared, the ability to navigate the seas.
And maybe that's just part of the human psyche of wanting to go and explore places, and maybe that extends back further than we would have thought.
Alan Simmons of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. He presented his case at a meeting of the Society for American Archaeology in Washington, D.C., first reported on in an article by journalist Andrew Lawler in the journal Science. "39 years ago, Voyager 1 swung by Jupiter on its journey to interstellar space. And as it did, it picked up spooky, low-frequency radio signals like this. The whistlers, as they're known, were radio broadcasts from unusual natural antennas, lightning bolts, which act like radio transmitters with current moving through a channel. Along with photos of the dark side of the planet, the whistlers confirmed the existence of lightning on Jupiter, but the limited observations made it hard to pin down where electrical storms gathered, and the bolts were thought to be rare compared to Earth. Now the Juno spacecraft has detected the first high-frequency radio signals and 1,600 new whistlers, which together suggest lightning on Jupiter is much more common than scientists thought. Every year, 20 million tons of salt are dumped on roads and highways across the U.S. to eliminate ice, and airlines spray up to 1,000 gallons of antifreeze on any one plane to de-ice it. But now scientists have come up with what might be a more environmentally friendly alternative.
We've often heard the expression, it's time to fight fire with fire. Well, I think now it's time to fight ice with ice.
Jonathan Barrico studies fluid mechanics at Virginia Tech. And what he means by that is if ice growth is inevitable, why not design certain areas of plane wings or roads or HVAC systems specifically to attract ice, to control the chaos and keep ice-forming moisture away from the rest of the surface.
Those structures have got to be able to understand the environment and be safe. And so they're going to have to withstand whatever Marsquake environment is actually there. We will know what that is. We will know if it's difficult or whether it's relatively easy, but we'll be able to accommodate it no matter what. Now, another experiment is a heat probe. This also sits on the surface and it pounds into the ground about 5 meters a set of thermistors that will measure the heat, and that will tell us how Mars is cooling off. You know, all our planets are built, 4.5 billion years ago. They're still cooling off from their initial accretion.